True transformation gains an unbreakable momentum at the precise moment you stop seeking witnesses for your change. Listen, not just to comprehend, but to feel a truth stirring in the silent spaces of your life. Every genuine evolution begins in the interior world, long before the external one is even aware. Yet so many of you exhaust your spirit attempting to drag the outer world into a conversation that belongs exclusively to the inner domain. You long for others to recognize your growth, your healing, your awakening, as if the validity of your journey depends on their validation. But the psyche does not evolve through applause. It evolves through a deep inner necessity, through the quiet pressure of the unconscious, compelling you to confront what you once buried. What renders your return unstoppable is not your skill in persuading others you are different. It is your willingness to cease performing your evolution and allow it to become your silent, undeniable reality. There is a particular suffering that surfaces when a person has grown beyond their old self, yet remains encircled by those who only recognize the former ghost. This pain does not stem from the growth itself, but from a persistent need to be seen as having grown. It is the ego's final, desperate attempt to keep you anchored to the past. It craves acknowledgement, validation, a mirror held up by others to confirm the inner labor was not futile. But understand this clearly. The unconscious does not liberate you, so you may re-enter the world seeking approval. It liberates you so you may walk freely, without asking permission to exist beyond who you once were. Many of you stand at this fragile threshold where the new self has already been born within, yet the outer world still speaks to the phantom of your past. In that tension, a deep temptation arises to explain yourself, to justify your healing, to prove your metamorphosis. But the more one strives to prove transformation, the more one remains chained to the very identity requiring transformation. You cannot stride into the future while still negotiating with the shadows of your former audience. You cannot rise to your destiny while offering footnotes to those who never bothered to read your story. Consider this image. A chrysalis begins to crack. The butterfly does not pause to defend why it no longer resembles the creature it was. It does not return to the earth to proclaim, "Look, I have wings." Its sole responsibility is to fly. If it attempted to justify its metamorphosis, it would never leave the ground. Humans, however, often linger at the edge of emergence, hesitant, fearing others will not accept the truth of their change. But you must grasp this. Your emergence is not for them. It was never for them. It is the fulfillment of a psychic necessity far older than their opinion. I recall a dream from analysis that illustrates this conflict perfectly. A woman dreamt she was crossing a bridge of crystal. Below her feet churned the vast ocean of her unconscious. On the far side stood her future, luminous and indistinct. Behind her, figures from her past called out, demanding explanations, demanding she defend her crossing. In the dream, she turned toward them, shouting back that she had changed. With every shout, the crystal beneath her trembled. It was only when she faced forward again, silent, refusing to justify her journey, that the bridge stabilized and bore her safely across. The psyche speaks in such symbols because it knows you understand imagery more profoundly than language. You recognize, without needing it explained, that turning back weakens your path and facing forward strengthens it. When you cease trying to prove yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim the psychic energy being drained by the need for validation. And once that energy returns to its rightful center, your return becomes inevitable. Let us descend deeper. The part of you that wants to prove you've changed is not malicious. Is simply afraid. It is the inner child who learned that worth must be demonstrated, that love must be earned, that identity must be argued for. This child lives within many adults, shaping their choices and reactions. When this child feels unseen, it pleads for recognition. When it feels doubted, it performs the very self it is trying to transcend. Therefore, transformation is not complete until this inner child is soothed, reassured, and invited to retire from its role as the spokesperson for your life. Only the adult self, the individuating self, can walk forward without explanation. In my studies, I observed repeatedly that the need to prove one's change is itself a remnant of an unhealed archetype. The paternal archetype, in particular, casts a long shadow here. If you were raised needing to justify your choices, defend your feelings, or earn acknowledgement through performance, you may later find yourself trying to prove your healing to figures who symbolically represent that paternal energy: partners, friends, employers. But this is an illusion. You're not trying to convince them. You're trying to appease the internalized authority who still sits in judgment within you. Once you dethrone this internal figure, once you no longer seek validation from that archaic source, you become free in a way the world can sense but cannot articulate. Your return becomes unstoppable when it is no longer fueled by reaction, but by revelation. As long as your growth is a response to another's doubt, you are still orbiting their gravity. But when your growth is an expression of your inner necessity, of your individuation, then no external force can interrupt it. You walk, speak, and choose differently. And people feel the difference, even if they do not comprehend it. Consider also the paradox of human connection. The more you try to prove you've changed, the less others believe it. They sense the anxious energy behind the performance. They sense you are still negotiating your identity. But when you stop explaining, when your transformation becomes quiet, embodied, and calm, others begin to feel something unmistakable. Your inner authority has returned. Your center of gravity has shifted from the external world back to the self. This is the point where many become afraid, because this calm is powerful. It dismantles old dynamics, dissolves dysfunctional patterns, and forces others to meet you at a higher level or fall away. The person who stops explaining becomes unpredictable to those who depended on their compliance. Your silence becomes unsettling to those who once relied on your need for validation. Thus, your true return does not roar. It emanates. Another dream comes to mind. A man stood before a doorway carved into stone. Behind him, a chaotic crowd shouted accusations. Before him, a silent forest glowed with amber mist. He wanted to step forward, but hesitated, turning back to defend himself, to refute the accusations. With every defense, the doorway narrowed, the forest dimmed. Finally, exhausted, he turned away from the crowd, said nothing, and stepped forward. As he did, the doorway widened, and the forest light surged around him. This is the symbolic truth. Justification narrows your path. Silence widens it. When you relinquish the need to prove your transformation, you reclaim your psychic liberty. You discover you no longer need to persuade, convince, or negotiate with the past. You simply walk, and in the walking, you become. This is how the self emerges quietly, inevitably, without permission. And now, as you listen, a quiet recognition may stir within. You know precisely which part of your life asks you to stop explaining. You know where you have outgrown a role, a relationship, a narrative. You know where your inner wisdom has advanced while your outer life lags in hesitation. Do not shame yourself for this lag. The outer life always moves more slowly than the inner, but it will catch up if you stop turning around. Your return is not a performance. It is a homecoming to your own self. And the moment you stop trying to prove you've changed, your transformation ceases to be a story and becomes a force. There is a moment in every human life when the psyche whispers a truth that can no longer be ignored. It is not loud or dramatic. It drifts upward from the deep unconscious like an ember rising from ashes. And the truth is this: The person you're trying to prove yourself to is no longer your judge, no longer your reference point, no longer the axis of your inner world. When this truth arrives, the ego panics, for it built its identity around that external mirror. But the self, your true center, recognizes this as liberation. To stop proving you've changed is not defiance. It is integration. It means the transformation has descended from the surface of your consciousness into the bedrock of your being. As long as change remains on the surface, intellectual, conceptual, performative, it will always crave witnesses. But when change reaches the archetypal level, it becomes silent, instinctive, embodied. You're no longer trying to be different. You simply are. And this state of being cannot be explained. It can only be lived. Many of you have inhabited roles that were never truly yours. You became the caretaker, the rescuer, the compliant child, the partner who softened their truth. These roles were not chosen. They were assigned by your early environment, carved into your psyche by invisible familial expectations. For years, you performed them well because performance ensured survival. But now, something within resists. Something old has fractured. Something ancient has stirred. The unconscious will not tolerate roles that suffocate the self indefinitely. It creates tension, restlessness. Dreams grow vivid. Relationships feel constricting, as if the soul has outgrown its skeletal frame. The person reaches for a more authentic identity, yet the old world continues to speak to them as if unchanged. This is the conflict. You want the world to see you as you feel yourself becoming. You want acknowledgement from those who misunderstood you. You want the person who doubted your worth to finally recognize what you carry. You want the past to bow before the new self you've forged. But the unconscious reveals a different truth. External validation feeds the ego, and the ego's hunger is never satisfied. The more you try to prove your change, the more you reinforce the belief that others hold authority over your identity. The need to be seen is not the need of the healed self. It is the cry of the wounded self, pleading not to be abandoned again. A dream from an analysand illustrates this. She carried a small lantern through a dark wood. Each time she met a figure from her past, she lifted the lantern to shine its light upon herself, to show them who she'd become. Each time she did, the flame dimmed, as if it could not survive the wind of their expectations. Only when she lowered the lantern, allowing the light to fall naturally, unforced, did the flame grow bright. Eventually, the forest illuminated itself. She realized the lantern was never meant to be held up as a performance, but carried like an inner truth. Her psyche was telling her, you do not illuminate yourself by lifting your transformation to others. Your light grows when you carry it quietly and walk. You may not realize it, but your comeback has already begun. It started the moment you grew too weary to explain yourself, the moment you stopped correcting misconceptions, the moment you accepted that some will never understand you, because understanding you would require them to confront parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. When you reached this point, something shifted. Your energy ceased leaking outward. It returned to its source. And when your energy returns to you, your destiny begins to take shape. The archetype of rebirth, the process of individuation, does not require an audience. In fact, an audience can hinder transformation because your focus becomes divided. One part of you evolves, another part watches itself evolve. This observation fractures your psyche. It creates an ego consciousness around the change that weakens it. True growth requires a descent into the unconscious where the ego is not the protagonist, but the witness. When you stop trying to prove you've changed, the ego steps aside. The unconscious can then reorganize your inner world without resistance. The self emerges not as an idea, but as an embodied presence, calm, centered, unequivocal. And people feel this presence even if they cannot name why. Some will respond with awe, others with confusion, some with fear. Because when you change without explaining, you disrupt the psychic contracts that once governed your relationships. The person who relied on your self-doubt will feel destabilized. The person who exploited your guilt will sense their influence waning. The person who expected you to remain small will feel confronted by your expansion. And the old dynamics will dissolve naturally. This is not punishment. It is alignment. You are not responsible for soothing the discomfort your healing creates in others. Their reactions belong to their unconscious, not yours. When you stop trying to prove your change, they must face their own shadows, their own projections, their own unexamined wounds. Many will resist. Some will retreat. A few will rise. But none of this concerns your path. Justification narrows your path. Silence widens it. In alchemical tradition, transformation is never validated by external observers. It is validated by the substance itself becoming something new. Gold no longer resembles lead. Consciousness no longer resembles instinct. No alchemist shouts, "Look, I have changed it." He waits in silence until the process is complete. Then the world sees the result without needing explanation. Your psyche operates on the same principle. The golden self emerges only when the performance of change ends. The unconscious contains what I term the shadow. The parts of you denied, repressed, or exiled because your environment could not hold them. Many remain stuck trying to prove themselves because they have not integrated their shadow. They want the world to see their light, but have not made peace with their darkness. Integration means you no longer hide your flaws, nor flaunt your strengths. You become whole, and a whole person is not preoccupied with being believed. Their very existence is their evidence. You can feel it when someone has integrated their shadow. There's a quiet gravity to them. They do not defend themselves. They do not chase validation. Their no is firm. Their yes is intentional. Their presence is unmistakably grounded. This is what makes their return unstoppable. Not force, not explanation, but authenticity. When a person reaches this state, the psyche aligns. The inner child, the adult self, the shadow, the persona, all begin to harmonize. Energy once scattered becomes concentrated, and this concentration creates momentum. Your life begins to reorganize around your new identity. Opportunities appear that match your inner truth. People who resonate with your evolved self enter naturally, as if drawn by a magnet. Those who belong to your past fall away without conflict. This is the mystery of individuation. When you stop performing change, you begin embodying it. When you embody it, you become undeniable. When you become undeniable, your return becomes destiny. In this quiet unfolding, you no longer rush, plead, or justify. You allow your path to strengthen beneath your feet instead of behind your words. The deeper you move into this alignment, the more you realize that proving yourself was never a step on the path. It was the cage that trapped you beside it. Your psyche wants freedom, not approval. It wants expansion, not explanation. It wants integration, not performance. And when you finally stop trying to prove you've changed, the psyche breathes again, like a sealed chamber within you suddenly opening and flooding with air. Feel this for a moment. Feel your body relax as you imagine no longer explaining yourself. Feel your shoulders loosen as you imagine releasing the need to be understood. Feel your breath deepen as you imagine simply living your truth without raising it like a banner. This stillness is not emptiness, it is power. And this power is the foundation of your return. An ancient psychological truth is often overlooked. Transformation is not linear or performative. It is cyclical and symbolic. You do not ascend once and forever. You spiral, returning to old layers with new consciousness each time. Those witnessing from the outside often see only the surface. They mistake your returns for regressions, your silence for avoidance, your introspection for distance. They misinterpret the soul's movements because they do not understand the symbolic rhythm through which the unconscious reshapes a life. This is why trying to prove your change is a betrayal of your own depth. The moment you attempt to justify your evolution, you reduce something profound and sacred into something consumable. You translate the soul's language into the dialect of social approval. And the translation is always insufficient. No explanation can capture the dream that woke you. No sentence can express the archetype that rose within. No conversation can communicate the moment you realized you could no longer betray yourself to maintain belonging. Human beings suffer most not from their wounds, but from their explanations of their wounds. They believe they need to be understood in order to heal. But understanding is not the catalyst of healing. Acceptance is. And acceptance begins when you stop trying to persuade others that your inner world is real. Of course it is real. It speaks through your instincts, your longings, your dreams. It speaks through the tremor in your voice when you first speak a hard truth. It speaks through the quiet satisfaction of honoring your own boundaries. Transformation does not ask for permission. It unfolds because the unconscious demands it. It is the same force that cracks the seed, that pushes the sprout toward the sun, that compels the butterfly to leave its casing. These transformations do not occur because the world is watching. They occur because nature insists upon evolution. Your psyche obeys the same law. When the unconscious is ready to move, it will disrupt anything that resists. This is why your relationships strained during your awakening, why your old life felt too small, why certain conversations drained you anew, why your silence began to feel like a sanctuary. You're not imagining it. You are awakening. And the more you awaken, the less tolerance you have for performing the version of yourself that kept others comfortable. Every attempt to prove your change is a step back into a shed identity. That is why it feels so heavy, so draining. You're trying to speak through a mask that no longer fits. A pattern I have observed across countless lives. The moment a person stops trying to prove their growth is the moment that growth becomes irreversible. Until then, transformation remains fragile, susceptible to old roles and fears. But once the internal shift reaches the point where explanation becomes unnecessary, the change becomes anchored. A new center of gravity forms within, and the world can no longer pull you backward. This inner anchoring often arrives through dreams. The unconscious uses symbols to announce a new phase. Some dream of mirrors shattering, the collapse of the old persona. Some dream of crossing thresholds, symbolizing transition. Others dream of guides leading them across rivers, symbols of initiation. Each dream carries the same message. You no longer belong to the old world, and you no longer need its approval for the new one. And so, I tell you this with quiet certainty, born from observing thousands of souls return to themselves. Your return became unstoppable the moment you stopped trying to prove you had changed. That was the moment your energy stopped leaking backward. The moment your past lost its authority. The moment your inner child was freed from performance. The moment your shadow began to integrate. The moment your archetype shifted. The moment your destiny inhaled its first breath. Walk forward now, not with explanation, not with performance, but with presence. Your transformation is already complete. The world will catch up in time. If this exploration of depth psychology and the power of silent integration resonated with you, please support the channel by giving this video a like and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more journeys into the psyche.